Hey, welcome to another Valley Forged. Today we're talking about layered projects for your laser engraver. And when you think about layered projects, you think, oh, okay, 3D, putting some layers together, and you just get this beautiful, beautiful project. But there are a lot of things that people just don't think about when it comes to layered projects. So I'm going to kind of go over it. I've made so many of them. One of the reasons I wanted to get into lasers was because of 3D projects and layered projects, because they're just cool. But little did I know that, as time went on, I made less and less of them, and I'm going to tell you why. The good. Hey, layered art, layered projects are beautiful. Obviously, they stand out. Whereas, like, if you were just going to get a painting today or a picture, it just doesn't have that oomph, right? Anybody can just post something into AI and get out just about any image they want. But they're not going to get a 3D image like a layered SVG. And I don't know, a year and a half ago, I made a video about, the famous big wave, painting. And I did that in layers, and it's fantastic, and I loved it. And I showed that you can use different media, and that's kind of fun. I was using a cardstock, but then I added some sparkled cardstock, and I added some foam to make that 3D part where I didn't have to use wood. That's so much more expensive. And I used paint, and it was fun creating all these different layers so that each one that I made was just a little bit different and fit. It was more art, right? And it was very, very personalized. And that's something pretty easy to do with 3D. So really, you can take just about any normal thing, and then you can add value to that normal thing, right? Take, for instance, This Is Fine, right? Almost everybody knows this meme at this point. So I took a look at that, and I was like, how can I turn that into a project, a 3D project? And so I went, of course, and I looked for somebody who had already done it, in the normal way, so that I could take that, put it into Lightburn, and create my version. I wanted to make a campfire version of This Is Fine, with literally the stand for it being 2 logs with a campfire. And there's some other versions that I'm thinking about doing of this, but, whether it was good or not, it was in my mind, and I had to make it. So I just did it, and here's how it turned out. And I think it looks great. So I'm putting it on Etsy as my own file now. I'm adding these other ones that I've done. I was on Laser Maker's Realm with Rich, Louisiana Hobby Guy, I think last week, and I had this file in 2D. And of course, Rich was like, hey, you should make that 3D. It should be 3D. So here I've made it 3D, and I'll just add that to the file. And so you have a couple of different ways to do it in layers. And of course, you can add your own sayings to this. You can make it your own. I did it one with paint, which, I really like with the fire. But then I really like it. I did it out of wood here, just to show that you can kind of make the colors out of wood if you want to. But of course, it's far more expensive, which is what I'm going to get to the bad, right? Oh, by the way, this file is down below. You can get to it on Etsy. It's a good way to support the channel. I make all kinds of files, so you can check that out. But I will get into the bad, which is layered files are a lot more expensive. Not just a little more expensive, they're a lot more expensive. And this is one of the reasons why I stopped doing them as much. I have to put a lot of thought into why you're going to do it before you're, if you're selling these things at markets and different things, how much more money is this costing you, and time is it worth it? And oftentimes it's not worth it. It's great to do it if it's a personal project, if it's something you want to put in your room, of course, or give it as a gift, of course, a little extra money is no big deal. But if you're going to make 100 of them, is it financially viable to do so, given the extra expense because every layer is generally another piece of wood or a piece of whatever. And so that starts adding up really quick. And then if you're going to paint them all, and then you have to glue them all, and each layer takes more time. So these are all things you got to think about. How I was using a 5.5 or 10 watt laser when I did my first project. So if I'm doing that out of wood, how many times is maybe that not going to cut out perfectly? Now that I have the Rolly Lasermatic, I put a piece of wood in there every single time it comes out the exact same way. I don't have to, in my mind, go, oh, is it going to cut out all the way or any of these sorts of things? Well, that's a big deal when you're using a lower power laser to make sure that every single, or even maybe one that's not as consistent, that, hey, is it going to come out the same way? And am I going to waste a piece of wood? And that's just exponentially worse when you're doing a layered project. I can't even tell you, some of the early clocks that I did, how much wood I wasted on my 5 and 10 watt lasers. It would have easily made up the price to get a 20 watt, but at the time those weren't so available. So to make a short story long, it's more expensive to do a layered project, and it takes way more time. So in those cases, you have to at least think about it. Is it worth it to me? For me, making the campfire thing, I wanted to do it, so it was worth it. And, in some cases, you can make so much more money on them that it does make it worth it. You just better be really good at what you're doing. I made some of these coffee signs, and yeah, they're really hard because when you put them together, you have to glue each layer just perfectly. And when you set it down, it needs to be perfect. And how many times, I ruined a couple of them, but they did sell pretty quickly. And I was able to personalize the colors and whatnot. But you got to think about, okay, I need like 6 or 7 different colors of paint. You got to finish each of these layers, and you got to wait for each of them to dry. Now, there are some tips and tricks you can come up with. Sometimes the first and the third layer, like here in the fire that I did for This Is Fine here, I can cut out the first layer and the third layer out of the same piece of wood, so I'm not wasting as much. And so I want you to think about, are there ways for me to not have to use as much wood? And oftentimes there is. But if you're doing some of these beautiful mandalas, they can go for a lot of money. Here's one right here, a beautiful layered piece of art. They're selling it for $215. Now, this particular store has hundreds of sales. Now, are they all sales of this? Probably not, but maybe they are. There's quite a few of these. So you can see, if you really do a good job and you make something very, very beautiful, you might be able to make some good money on it. But it's going to take a lot of wood, a lot of time, a lot of patience for you to get to this point. So I'm certainly not trying to dissuade you from doing layered art. It is one of the great reasons to have a laser. It is super fun. And I really, obviously, I enjoy it because I made the file, and I'm going to make many more in the future and more mixed media. But I did want, after experience, it just came to my mind, you know what? I want people to know the pitfalls of this as well, and something to think about before they start spending maybe a lot of money and a lot of time trying to make them. At least think about that part. So that's all I wanted to say. All right. Well, and I hope you get my layered file and make it. All right. I'll see you in the next one. Love y'all.